Hello and welcome to our first podcast of 2026. I hope that the holidays and the new year were kind to you. Today, the Hadean team is very happy to announce that we will be expanding our interviews to include authors we have found to be especially important to the exploration of folklore, grimoires, and the underworld, especially for practitioners of magic, as well as those curious about its venerable history. In this month's podcast, I am very pleased to introduce my friend and fellow practitioner, Lili Regulus, and their monumental 2-volume exploration of one of sorcery's most notoriously chthonic and untamed forces, Lilith, her history in context, and the many threads of culture, religion, and magic which have woven together to usher her into the 21st century. She of the Night was released last year and is a tour de force of knowledge and spellcraft conjured into being by Lili Regulus and put out into the world by the excellent folks at Theion Publishing. If you enjoy this sort of conversation on the arts of the occult and esoteric, then please like, share and subscribe to our channel. We are always very grateful for every little thing that you can do to help us grow and reach a wider audience. I am your host, Matt Hadfield, and I am honoured to present Idlu Lili Regulus to the Hadean Press podcast. Lili, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice to finally get you on the show. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you give us an introduction to yourself and your work?
Well, I'm a Scandinavian sorcerer with a background in archaeology and history. I have written a couple of books and some articles, all dedicated to untamed deities or spiritual creatures like Hecate, Lilith, the Medusa, and the Lady of the Elder Bush.
And Lili, what was it that brought you to the study and practice of magic?
The first book that I read as a child was on Greek mythology. After that, I, through some comics, was introduced to the figure of Solomon. And then the Bible we had in my home had the Apocrypha included. So I found that very curious or weird, those stories. And then in my very early teens, I got a facsimile of a Swedish Black Book and also the 6th and 7th books of Moses. I purchased them on a Viking reenactment fair, and it happened to be located on an Iron Age burial mound. So I, on that summer, carried out my second Utesitta session and then started working through those books. So it was some pretty intense teenage years, but I guess it's how it should be in your teens. But I can't say that I began to study magic in a structured way until in 1998.
I see. And Lili, what was it that specifically attracted you to untamed deities?
That came quite later, and it wasn't especially that I was attracted to them, because I even seemingly, or in retrospect, seem to have had some uninterest in the ones that approached me, but anyhow, they contacted me more or less.
And so Hecate and Lilith, are there any other specific deities that you were specifically interested in your youth?
Yes, in my youth, definitely Kali as well. But since I really understand in hindsight that even though many pujas and stuff like that have been carried out, I simply know too little to care to speak about it in a public setting. But the very first little terracotta idol I got as a child was one of Kali.
Today, we are here to discuss your huge, maybe monolithic double volume book titled She of the Night, which was put out last year by Theion Publishing. I have been working my way through the book, through both of the texts now for about 6 months. And I have to say, it's a one of a kind type of a book. It was rightfully given Book of the Year status by Foolish Fish, actually, in his recent YouTube video. And this text, or better yet, this encyclopedia, covers the entire history of the spirit known as Lilith, going back as far as the Epic of Gilgamesh to Sumeria, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, through Semitic and Hebrew sources, and then on to Aramaic, Arabic, and Greek. Like, truly, this is an absolutely monolithic work, and you should be really proud of what you've accomplished with this. Denny's recommendation as Book of the Year is absolutely deserved. Um, there is often like a significant debate about archaeological findings, even to this day, and you present the work in such a fair and balanced manner. But equally, you're never afraid to add your own experience and understanding. So honestly, I can't think of a better book to kick off the Hadean Press's new year with. So thank you for coming onto the show today to talk to us about this. From now, I think we're going to start branching out a little bit, talking to people in the wider community. And I honestly, I thought your book was so wonderful that we definitely wanted to have you on first. So welcome as a guest of honor in that sense.
Thank you ever so kindly for those words, Matt. I truly appreciate them, and I feel quite proud about these tomes, and also very grateful to my publishers and my readers and the plethora of contributors to my books on Lilith, because there really have been so many contributors, and also to Hadean Press for having me on Hadean podcast as the first non-Hadean published author.
Yeah. So Lily, how did you come to be so familiar with Lilith? And what was it that inspired you, or what was it that led you to create this book?
I think seldom have Lady Lamb's phrase "mad, bad, and dangerous to know" been more applicable to a deity or a spiritual creature as it is with Lilith. For me, it have been almost the same scenario as with my first Hecate encounters. I, prior to those, had little interest in these goddesses, actually. Although Hecate can be quite direct, I still would compare the difference in how they approached me as the difference between digesting mushrooms on a burial mound and being kicked through a mirror at the same split second as good acid kicks in.
Oh yeah, okay.
With Lilith, I had three encounters in the 90s that really set the tone, and the first two, even though they were very shocking and direct, they didn't instill devotion or a yearning to really go much beyond that. So I had mystical experiences, but I didn't know what to do with them. I think the first one, the first one was on Good Friday, 1995. And then I had some stark, almost catatonic hallucinations where someone or something presented herself as the Maid of Desolation. The year after, during my third Utesitta session, I saw myself offered to a harpy-like incarnation of Lilith. And a votive poem called Myrta Luna was penned. And then finally, on October 6th in 1998, received profound vision and was bestowed with the title of She of the Night. And I got it both as an epithet of Lilith and also as the title of what I at that time perceived to be a love song or a hymn of praise to her. But the thing is, I don't play any instrument. So for years I was confounded with what am I going to do with it, or how is it going to be expressed. But the same year I had begun to practice ceremonial magic, as I mentioned, via an order, and Nama and Lilith were frequently addressed there. Years then passed, and as I got hold of better source material and more books got digitized, I slowly started to fill my workbooks with notes to self regarding Lilith. And then another maybe 5 years passed, and although I am creative, I have had zero inspiration to write or compile something regarding anyone or anything outside academia. But in 2013, Lilith quite frankly demanded me to write her book and reminded me of the title she had given me, as if I could have ever forgotten it. And so I did. I first took out my vacation days from my time as a teacher, and then a year-long leave of absence. And I was sure to have completed it in that time, 13 months. But yeah, it would take me almost a decade to finish it.
But the inspiration began, what, some 25 years ago?
31, she came, and 27, yeah, exactly, 27 years ago, I was given the title.
So it's been sort of brewing within you this entire time.
Not the book.
No?
The book since 2013. Yeah.
Right. The book since 2013. Right. But
Yeah.
still, it's a long time to have that initial spark within you, and then whatever it was flowing through you led you to that place. Right. There's a lot of material. I mean, I can't express this enough to the listener. I really recommend that you pick this up, considering the quality and the price of these texts. The sheer staggering amount of information provided is unbelievable. I can't begin our conversation today. We're going to aim for like an hour or two, but if we were going to completely talk about everything in this book, we would be here for a week. So
yeah.
We've got a lot to get through, but I think,
I'm really so happy I didn't get an upper page limit.
Oh yeah, so am I. Yeah. Yeah, your book explores Lilith, and you spend a lot of time delving into the historical precursors to Lilith and the cultures which ultimately produced this goddess that we understand today. Lilith is far more than just a single story. You mentioned in the opening pages the idea of something that I'm quite interested in, this idea of west washing. And I really appreciate this term, as it's something that I've written about myself in a different kind of way. I've used different words, but when I read your way of explaining it, I thought, actually, this is even better than the way I've put it together. So when it comes to the idea of west washing and west washing the spirits, specifically these spirits, these darker spirits like Lilith, or as you mentioned earlier, these untamed goddesses, could you elaborate further on what you mean by this in relation to your book?
Sorry, I'm about to laugh because I thought I had written whitewashing, and I know it's west washing, but yeah, sorry, I I got sidetracked.
It's okay.
Like we talked about earlier, that sometimes you don't recognize that you have written it yourself. I'm gonna try to answer as I process it. Um, Several chapters in my book or books are written more or less as direct responses to authors' works or views. And in some regards, I have been pleasantly surprised that I haven't gotten much negative reactions after they got published, because I've been quite busy trying to puncturing some old misconceptions.
Mm.
I wrote She of the Night as a votive gift in order to spread her names and actions in a more informed way, away from both dark, unsubstantiated fluff, but also away from relativistic cutification of the self-help, heal yourself through the so-called rebel Lilith or whatever you have in the West. The case of Lilith, at least in my view, has almost been as bad as the white and west washing by scholars from the late 50s and magicians from the 40s until the mid or late 70s regarding Hecate. For Lilith, the picture has most often been skewed by downplaying her darker traits or highlighting only the sexual aspect. And either way will cause our understanding of her to suffer, because it's an exotism and an otherness creating, even though she contains loads of otherness or more objective otherness, it's still an exotism or a fetishizing of her, or worse yet, in some books they present the housebroken, domesticated aura surrounding Lilith. But of course, she has many a bright, or maybe not bright, but let's say positive and constructive sides as well. And once her love is gained, it is that of a fiercely protective mother or patroness. And Lilith's story is one of plurality and a multifaceted one. So I think it's fair to say that whatever any author or scholar claims, also try to think the opposite, or just check when and where this was written, because the views I get from people on the more eastern part of the world from a European setting is quite different from the one in many academia theses.
Do you think that's because in those situations in Eastern Europe, it's more rooted in a living, perpetuated tradition? It's active and like being actively practiced as opposed to just being intellectualized?
I think definitely that's the thing. I noticed it so when I was married into a Jewish family, and also when I talk to my Arabian neighbors. This is not something fanciful or folklorish. This is something that at least their parents talked about, and even with those that doesn't believe in it or them, still make the precautions, the defenses for the or against these spirits.
So they still use like apotropaic charms and things.
Yeah, definitely. Then it's actually thanks to my neighbors and my former family that I got tipped about certain books, and so because that tradition is still alive.
Mm. I also really enjoyed your point that you just made before about how magic isn't self-help.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit more about how one in these contexts of dealing with this kind of sorcery, with this kind of, I mean, would you say goetic sorcery in that sense of working with untamed spirits, shades of the dead, etc. How is this practice? What's a better way of putting it?
Yeah.
How does one differentiate this kind of magic from something that's like, oh, I'm going to do this magic because it's going to immediately make my life better. It's going to
Mm,
immediately make me more productive in the workplace, like that sort of
mm,
garbage that I'm not a
mm.
fan of.
uh, I approach it from, in lack of better terms, a shamanistic, goetic sorcery approach, but also at times it's not about ceremonial magic with these beings. As to some, I am a devotee, even though I have Hecate as my patron goddess. And I think Yake very aptly put it. I think it's with Klepot, um, that the magician can work in a truly meaningful way with the spirit from the safe confines of the circle. So with many of these, you have to approach them in a non-traditional way. But I also recommend, and I think we might talk about this later when we speak about the four Tekupa queens, that that there are structures that you can apply as a more traditional ceremonial magician to work with these beings in a very meaningful and respectful way, um, which you don't have to approach as a devotee.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, well, let's start at the beginning then, the beginning of the book, and the beginning of as well as of humans or mankind's earliest recorded stories. So, why do you begin the book with an exploration of the primordial dragon of chaos, Tiamat?
Indeed. Well, why did I do that? Uh, in some aspects, uh, one could really consider the book to begin on page 55 with rulers of the land of no return. But being me and not having an upper page limit, uh, I thought that I should start even before the beginning of what some could regard as the predecessors to Lilith. And then also before the beginning of time space itself. Very humble, right? Although
Yep.
no one complained, although no one complained thus far, I hope it does not come across as that I equate Tiamat with Lilith.
Mm,
And furthermore, given that the offspring or tribes of Tiamat can be
mm.
mighty allies, I find it apt to include them here.
It's interesting because there are some similar themes, like with the blood and the flesh and the winds in the story of the the tale of Gilgamesh. Um, it might not be a directly linked to Lilith in that sense, but there are themes of a mother
Mm,
goddess or a mother demoness who becomes a mother of abominations. As a reader, it comes off as it's you're setting the scene for what comes, and you're going back really to the most primordial story,
mm.
and it seems really fitting. It works really well, I think.
Thank you. And will, since I addressed also Anzu in my book, I thought it prudent that I address that it is not Tiamat that greets you in the Great Hall of the entrance of the British Museum, but instead unto. So this is also why I address Tiamat. And if Lilith belongs both to the other side and this world, I see Tiamat as the prima materia from which Lilith could extort herself in for human approachable form. And with Tiamat, everything is commingled and unbound. So it's very hard to actually approach her in any sense, and more rather perceive her or experience her out in nature.
One of the themes that I'm really interested in, and I'm sure you know from reading my book, is this idea of the North Wind. And
sure.
This has been sort of...
Love your book, by the way.
Thank you. This has been sort of it's become something more recently with the publication of the Summa Sacra Magicae, because the Northeast in the diagram, in the model which is presented within that text, not specifically the North, but the Northeast, is this empty space. And Skinner makes this. He makes an observation that in Eastern traditions, this is known as the Demon Gate, and that's a really interesting point that I think is good to make. But we can't assume a one-for-one. The Eastern tradition is the same as the Western tradition, but it is still really interesting either way. But this idea of the North being this really important location of the winds, etc. I begin my book with a short bit about Tiamat and the North Wind. So in all of your writing, what is it that you think is so special about the North and the North Wind and this idea of creation?
I think I should address the winds because first, before we maybe go to the North, because I have a rather different idea, and it's in the book that I'm currently writing, Hecate, Son of the Crevasse Goddess, where I trace the origin for the 7 directions that are in the Summa Sacra Magicae to a whole different place. And there, it's not even sure that you can really tie them to 7 of the 8 traditional directions, because the 7 winds and the 7 directions predates the North and South, and literally the 4 divisions of the horizon. So in the oldest version of Enuma Elish, the Epic of Creation, we find a conflicting coexistence of the older 7 winds mentioned, along with the 4 winds. And furthermore, we are there given some of the earliest accounts of the North as auspicious and liminal, and that's what you brought up in your book as well, because it's the North Wind that is sent to carry the blood of Tiamat to a secret place in the North, where it will be kept away, stored safely, like in a depository, away from mankind. And the division of the horizon into 4 parts apparently superseded a system in which the 7 winds define the 7 main directions, dividing the compass into 7 sectors. And I'm going to try to find the relevant lines in Enuma Elish. He, Merodach, made a net that surrounded the middle of Tiamat. He caused the 4 winds to seize the net in order that nothing of her might escape. The south wind, the north wind, the east wind, the west wind. He caused to be near to his side the net, the gift of his father Anu. He created the evil wind, Imhulu, the storm, the hurricane, the 4-fold wind, the 7-fold wind, the devastating wind, the unequal wind. caused them to come forth. The winds he created, the 7 of them. And the scholars, Levi and Levi, to them it was quite evident that these mentions of the fourfold wind represented an interpolation into an older text, which merely spoke of the 7 winds. And in fact, the whole part from he caused the 4 winds to cease the nest until the words the west wind do not occur at all in the original tale of the actual fight. Whereas at least one of the 7 winds, and that is only the north wind, plays a part in Marduk's victory over Tiamat. And that is in tablet 4, 11, and in tablet 4, 1. So as early as the first Babylonian dynasty, that is 1894 to 1595 BCE, when probably the final redaction of the Epic of Creation was drawn up, it was deemed necessary to insert an allusion to this new 4 winds, as the 4 direction had by then, for all practical purposes, replaced the 7 direction scheme. Knowing this and further exploring the 7 directions can and hopefully will once again be of some importance for ceremonial magicians. And had it not been for the publication of Summa Sacra Magica, I wouldn't have gone down this rabbit hole or wormhole that I've been in. I think it's almost to the day a year ago since I got the book.
Right. Well, I just got the second part as well, which is just landed on my doorstep the other day. I'm really fascinated about this subject, and I suppose we could talk about this for another week.
I'm sure we will do in our next call.
But the idea of what is in the Summa Sacra Magica as we're going through it now, we can read it on the surface detail and see like the very basic surface presentation of it, like the nuts and bolts. This is these are the names, etc., etc. I think there's, as you just said, if it hadn't have been published, you wouldn't have gone on this rabbit hole and discovered all this really interesting new information.
Yeah.
I think it's going to do that to a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to start reading it, and it's going to ignite something because it's going to make a connection with something else that they know. And I think from the time that it's published in its fullness, when all 3 books are out, and I think there's another book, there's another version of the translation coming out as well by a separate group of people, which I'm also looking forward to.
And one of our shared friends also have a book on the 7 winds on his back burner. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
So when all of this,
to look forward to.
When all of this comes together, I think we're going to see a new renaissance is a bit of a strong word, but we're going to see a big transformation, I think, in our understanding of the origins of this form of magic and how it was absorbed into Europe and how it transformed when it reached Europe. And then everything that comes subsequently after that, it will inform our understanding of why these structures are in place. And I'm really excited to learn more about that. But yeah, I think beginning your book with this chapter was perfect. I really appreciated it. And I'm really looking forward to exploring and discovering more about the North and the North Wind, because everything that I wrote about in my book about the North was a question to my readers, really. It was like, this is all the information that I have, and I'm really curious to find out more. So I'm sort of, throwing a cat among the pigeons to see sort of what will come of it. I'm really excited to
I've never heard that expression before. I love it.
But I'm excited about what you're putting together, and I'm also excited about what our mutual friend is putting together as well. But yeah, so to return to She of the Night, you offer a really excellent context for the emergence of Lilith, and You explore the myths and the history of various ancient goddesses such as Ereshkigal, Ninkigal, Ishtar, Inanna, and more. Can you explain them briefly in your understanding of the underworld in relation to these specific underworld goddesses, and why these ancient underworld goddesses have such an important role to play in the story of Lilith?
Well, technically, in the story of Lilith, they do not play an important role, but as predecessor and harbingers of her shining forth, some of them mentioned are pivotal. And one theory or one approach or one school of thought that quite many scholars share, among them my friend Swartz, it is that they consider Lilith's Mesopotamian background to have begun around the Middle Babylonian period, which is circa 1595 to 1155 BCE. And they saw it as it was then different demonesses coalesced into the conception of the afflictress of childbirth, Lamashtu, Wardat Lili, and Lilitu. And the latter two were female spirits that stalked the night in order to ensnare and to drain men. The Lilitu, like Lamashtu, cannot bear children of their own. Their breast had no milk, so when they acted as deceitful wet nurses to children, they fed them poison, which caused the children to waste away. And in my tombs, I had already addressed this, although it has seemingly been perpetuated in other magic books, that the Byzantine demoness Abisu has something to do with abyss, and that's a common misconception. It actually means breastless, and it's a reference back to these demonesses, and it doesn't mean breastless as in lacking breast, but lacking functional breasts. And possibly the later Jewish name Buznai can have its origin in that as well, or it can be a family name among demonesses. But this Abusu are found on Greek and East European amulets, so she's quite famous in her own right. But I don't share really the view of the three afflictresses that coalesced to form one afflictress sometime during the first century of the Babylonian captivity to be named Lilith. I reckon too much stock has been placed in the similar sounding name and spelling of Lilitu and Lilith. And that might have obscured it, because one must not forget that the time when these were translated were also the time when so many scholars were pious and devout enough to see explanations in prehistory for things they found in the Bible. I rather reckon that the deity from this cultural sphere that informed or preceded Lilith, the goddess, and foreshadowed her immense role and rule as a governess or queen of spirits, is Ninlil. We can also take a closer look at Lamashtu, and compared with her, Lilith would definitely have many acute similarities and traits, but it would only be for one or two of the roles of Lilith, one being the afflictress of young children, and two to act as a fierce mobber. But I don't really see them as precursors. If we instead expand our gaze a bit further east we find that roughly during the same period, but they're called the Avestan period, which is circa 1500 to 1400 BCE. We find that the first iteration of the Sasanian Avesta liturgy, Videvdad, and the law repudiating the demons, in its penultimate chapter, addresses the demoness Aihia. And to me, she represents the first more or less intact iteration of Lilith in
And so,
everything but name. Yep.
is this more ancient Persia?
Exactly. This demoness appear in the Videvdad. So
Right.
it's the Avesta liturgy. And this demoness is called Aihia. And if we later get some time to address Sasengen Barfaranges, I would
Yes.
love to talk more on her and her Noah name, because her Noah name is Thesen Margdeb.
Okay.
And yeah, loads of easy names, right?
Yeah.
And then you also asked me about my underworld. Yeah.
Yes, so specifically like the underworld relationship, because perhaps it might not immediately leap out to the reader about the underworld nature of it or the
Mm,
underworld tone of it, but I think your book goes in explores this in a bit more detail. So yeah,
mm.
could you explore or explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Lilith's origins seem to be really found in the underworld, and although she is preeminently a wind spirit, the first written um, attestations and the ways we understand how humanity perceived of the winds is that they belonged and had their home in the underworld, and they traveled in through the cave entrances, either at the top or at the root of the mountains, and then lived in a conical sphere or conical shape down in the underworld. And she both travels on, manifest as, and rule via winds. So the underworld would both be her seat of power and also her lungs. That's probably the only way I can think of it.
So Lily, what is your specific relationship then with the underworld?
My underworld is both a very earthly and tangible one, and at the same time a lofty, starry one. It's quite
Oh,
akin to the one you describe in your first book.
we're on the same page, I think, when it comes
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that.
yeah, definitely. I doubt that I in words could put it better than you did, and I can maybe recount for my experiences, but uh, people
So
have
for our,
described me as quite pragmatic in my ways. I always take things very literal, so I would call my approach practical and that of a literal practitioner. And as such, caves, graves, mountains, burial mounds, working on or in the ground with soils, dirt, blood and dust, and under the stars, all informs my chthonic praxis and world.
so do you draw a division between the night sky and the underworld, or is the night sky and the underworld one in the same thing?
Yeah, it's the one reflected above. So um, I can't recall which myth cycle it is, with the two halves placed on top of each other, and then the Apsu and waters around. It might be the Mesopotamian, so it's
Yeah. I have a
yeah.
diagram of this map. Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
So is the underworld something that exists in an immediacy? It's something that's immediately present.
I think it's way easier when you, as I have done for the past 9 years, live on the first floor or the ground floor. It's a very physical approach to the contact. And once again, it's going to be quoting Jake, but it's rather fitting as it is his Greater Feast Day we record this on. I think he mentioned something about working magic in high rise, and he explained it with that. Yeah, it's nothing that won't cause any problem that some bags of grave dirt can solve. So for me, it's a very immediate and grounded praxis.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Grounded and immediate. Yeah. That's exactly how I approach things too. So Lily, you mentioned earlier this spirit named Lamashtu. So
Mm.
is this spirit a blueprint for a later conceptualization of Lilith in the Eden story? Or
Uh,
is this a very different sort of a very different sort of creature, a very different sort of deity?
the short answer is no, at least not for what we in general could refer to as the Nachash Samael Lilith in Eden. Uh, no. And if we go to Lamashtu herself, the very fact that Anu, the leader of the gods and also her own father, cannot control Lamashtu could indicate that she belongs to an even more archaic and enigmatic lineage than Anu. And in that sense, she can definitely experience parallels between her and both Hecate and Lilith. Um, with Hecate, it is the similarity to her being revered by Zeus, and he even talks about her as his daughter because he wants to impose the idea that it's a continued lineage from the previous reign. And with Lilith, one could make the comparison then that she during half the month seduces the Hebrew god and replaces his bride or partner, the Shekinah,
Mm.
but also that she represents the clipboard. And uh, these shells uh, should not just be perceived as something evil or dangerous, but they are both prerequisites for creation at the same time as they are byproducts of it. So in that sense, we maybe could force or apply some parallel between Lilith and Lamashtu, but otherwise I would not say that. The scholar Farber, one of the few or maybe the only real authority on Lamashtu that I can recommend, wrote about her that it is safe to say that her actions are ultimately performed by her own volition and without any aspect of divine wrath or revenge for sin and disobedience by the afflicted individual. On the contrary, her murderous actions even evoke spontaneous reactions by the gods to save mankind from the attacks of Lamashtu. And While we address Lamashtu, I would like to clear up two things on her behalf. One is an exoneration from being called a whore. In the early 1900s, a term was translated into whore, and this has kept popping up not only in dark fluff context,
Oh,
but
right. Okay.
also in other modern and quite modern ones, magical publications. And the term is kadishtu, and that translation is very problematic as whore because kadishtu does not share the same linguistic root as kesertu or kasartu, which is prostitute. And those two words or terms literally means woman with curled hair. And it's referring to a distinctive hairstyle of them. And karkaritu is the other word for prostitute, and they don't share the same roots either. Nevertheless, in the most famed German translation called the Die Labartu-Texte, Myrman translate Kadishtu into whore. And Kadishtu marat il anim sa ilani, he translates as Anu's daughter is a whore among the gods. And I have at other times seen the term translated as wet nurse or midwife or as distinguished lady. And I
Rather
think
different,
it is,
rather different
yeah,
translations. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And many have probably refrained from translating it as wet nurse because she's famed to attack babies. But then they have also missed the case that she gives suckle to them. So I really think it is in this term or translated wet nurse, distinguished lady that we shall find the true translation. Because Lamashtu is also a lady of special status among the gods because no one have governance over her. And yeah, that's just some of the reasons why this should be reconsidered, that translation. And the second thing is that she's not a simple sickness demoness. And then I will quote Farber. There is no doubt that Lamashtu is a primary demon and not a secondary personification of a disease. As a matter of fact, as a daughter of Anu, she has family connections right into the center of the pantheon. Neither her name nor her features, as described in the text or depicted on amulets, give any indication that the particular disease is her ultimate raison d'etre. She is not of the same lowly status as the personified, cold in the head demon who is sitting on the back porch waiting for a victim of its very narrow destructive interest. On the contrary, Lamashtu ranks much higher and is much more dangerous. She is a paramount evil force whose action can and regularly do lead to loss of health and subsequent or immediate death. To call her just another illness-causing demon could be an insulting understatement. To avoid the risk to incur her wrath, the search for a specific Lamashtu disease should be called off.
Interesting. Right. That's really fascinating. So for our listeners, Lamashtu is the lion-headed,
Yes,
lion depicted monster. Is monster the correct word or a demon? How would you correctly
demon,
translate that?
definitely. Yeah,
Demon, definitely. Yeah.
but she has the pre or sometimes suffix, but most often prefix, ilat and ilani, and that denotes a deity. So you might rather call her a demonic deity then, or a monstrous deity. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I think it's just really interesting how, like we mentioned prior to this, like the idea of West washing.
Mm.
whitewashing, and this idea that the certain words which have been translated by academic sources, which have just repeated verbatim without critical thought later on. And I think you've done a really good job in your book of presenting some really good arguments that sort of go against that, go against the grain of standard
Thank you.
academic understanding of things. So for me, I have my own personal understanding of these things because of what everything that I've read up to this point, but I have not been somebody who's reading it from an academic perspective. I've been reading it very much as a layman and
Mm.
just somebody who's very interested in the subject. So I tend to just take people's word for it. Whereas you go into it into a very you go deep into the etymology of the words and of the history of the phrases and things, the way that these names are constructed as well. Um, and I should bring this up too. That my next question was throughout your book, you offer these little bordered vignettes where you explore etymology, cultural concepts, ritual expressions, even definitions of words. And you write at the end of one of these, I think it's on page 158. You write, all these examples are provided here for you, the reader, to craft and shape your own weapons in the form of implications and incantations. And I really liked, I really loved reading that. I really loved reading through these little vignettes that you've provided for us. As you know, as I encountered them in the book, they offer this nice little break from the main theme, and they explore these little tangential aspects in this really intuitive manner. So yeah, it's not much of a question, but yeah, I really, I really enjoyed those little breakdowns that you do, and you. I don't want to say you attack academic um, consensus, but you raise really interesting questions and points, and you bring up your own understanding of things, and you present evidence that goes contrary to it, and you do it very well. And I think it leaves the reader with the tools to then
Oh.
look at the evidence and make up their own mind. And you're quite good at not giving somebody the answer. You say, well, this is the evidence. This is what I found. Um,
Thank you. Uh, I don't know how many chapters and especially footnotes I have written in reply to posts I have seen online on that specific day. But since I rather prefer to do it like this than to go into the comment section. But regarding this little boarded vignettes, thank you so much for just mentioning them and letting me know that. I'm so glad to hear that you and some other readers that have reached out have enjoyed them. Uh, in the special case you mentioned, um, I think it's simply a page lifted from one of my workbooks. It's from a result summary section with sentences that I noticed the chamber to come especially alive to, or to them to pay attention to. But I must really credit Jessica Grote, my amazing editor, because it's she and her initiative for creating these features in my two tomes. And hers have been a Herculean task. And I recall that my friend, um, the esteemed Mr. Daniel Yates, describing my original manuscript as something maniacally hammered down in feverish, devoted fervor. So I'm
wow.
not jealous at all on the different editors that have gone through and over this manuscript.
Well, they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah,
Um,
they have.
it breaks the text up in a really interesting way, and it gives you this pause where you can stop and just sort of and focus on a tangential point, but like you can sort of like ruminate on it, think about it, really like sit on it for a minute and like consider the point, and it's sort of it's outside of the narrative, but it's addressing a component of the narrative, if that makes sense, and
Yeah.
it flows really well. I really have to applaud your editors, and you for putting it together. It's really good stuff. Like as an example, up till now, you mentioned this earlier as well, but the idea of Lilitu being um, cognate with Lilith, and how
Mm,
that's not necessarily the case.
mm,
And I just thought that was really interesting because up till this point, I have always made that assumption. I've everything that I've read, all the information that I knew was that Lilitu was directly connected to Lilith. So the fact that you've put out the information that contradicts it, but not in a confrontational way, but like in a why don't we all consider this alternative information sort of way. I think it's really interesting and really fascinating. It's got lots of material for us to get through and contemplate. So thank you for that. Regarding the Lilitu, though, I do have another question that was prior to this, but it was the about the classification of the Lilitu um, as a type of spirit, not a singular type of spirit, but more of a plurality of spirits.
mm.
Um, the best way I have it in my understanding of the Grimoires is to refer to it as a light fleeing spirit or a lucifugus, as Michael
Mm.
Sellis would put it. Do you have anything that you would add to that about specifically this Lilitu classification?
I think we can explore some thoughts or commonalities among these Lucifugus spirits that you mentioned. It's a great and a complicated, almost theological question. First, I would maybe say, uh, although it's a chicken and egg dilemma, I would still, just in my view, consider Lilith to be the first among those spirits, and that she existed before a plethora of other spirits of mankind existed, and also that mankind's classification vocabulary and linear time just had to catch up with her. But then I also reckon that the question um, is, as we mentioned, a bit obscured by the similarities among the names. Skurlock and Anderson put it like this in their diagnosis in Assyrian and Babylonian medicine. The Lilu demons and their female counterparts, the Lilitu or Ardat Lili demons, were hungry for victims because they had once been young men and women who had themselves died young, before they had been given the time to experience many aspects of life. Examples cited in the medical text corpus include situations such as never having experienced sexual pleasure, becoming a parent, having milk-filled breast, fulfilling one's desires, never rejoicing with other children, or having found a husband. Other reasons for becoming a demonic spirit comprise of having been forcefully separated from one's home or from one's child. Both the Lilu and the Lilitu demon have similarities with the Asaku demon, and that is a Caesar demon that attacks people. And they take refuge in hidden corners, nooks and crannies, and can cause headaches and seizures. Bearing the refuge part in mind, one could interpret them as akin to the light fleeing demons.
Yes.
And if we look to the Lilitu and the Ardat Lili, or the Lilu woman, they share some characteristics with Lamashtu in turn, especially their attested obsession with children. And if we then take to rather focus on the light fleeing aspect, I think two things are at play when dealing with those kind of demons. In the Sefer Mera Hayaladim, many traditional Jewish remedies, cures, and amulets for protecting children are described. And therein we learn that demonesses under the governance of Lilith and the other three demonic queens are allowed to do harm on the nights preceding Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Okay.
And the Jewish Sunday begin on the secular Saturday at the sighting of 3 stars and last until sundown on Sunday, as each Jewish day begins with an evening. And trust me, I will get to the live stream part. And so it means the eves of Wednesdays mean Tuesday nights and so on. This means that they are also freed, the demons, on the Shabbat, which might sound odd, but Sholem in his Kabbalah mentioned the expression Nukba di Tehoma Rabba, and that is the maw of the great abyss, as the place where demons return to on the Shabbat night, when they have no power or less power in the world. So that would mean two things. The Shabbat is a liminal auspicious time, best spent indoors. And although demons are out and roam, their powers are greatly diminished, and they will return into the maw of the great abyss once this time has passed. Now, what have these timings to do with the possibly light fleeing spirits? Well, in the Zohar 2:163b, we learn that the powers of Lilith are greatest at the time of the waning of the moon, when the dogs of night, which can be an allusion to demons, are loosed from their chains to roam about till morning. After the full moon apex is reached, the moon is perceived as blemished and stained by blood. This causes, the causes of this, I have a lecture on regarding Lilith and the blood of the moon. And it is during this time of blemish that the Shekinah departs from the Hebrew God, and Lilith seduces her partner. It is then that the powers of Lilith and her offspring, the light-fleeing demons, are at their zenith. As such, they would be perceived to thrive in as little of the sunlight reflected via the moon as possible. And from that, one could assume or propose a possible relation or similarity between Celes Lucifugus, described in the Grand Grimoire. But this is not something that I have looked into beyond what I have put in my 2 tomes. And I don't even mention the Grand Grimoire in them. A small final note regarding both the light of the moon and the Shabbat. It is in Hebrew tradition held that if a child smiles during the night of the Shabbat or on the new moon, it is a sign that Lilith is playing with him. So, yes, both shunning the light indoors and the light of the moon / sun outdoors seems to be at play or fill a functional part among these beings. I'm very happy that you alerted me to this parallel, because that is something I haven't reflected on prior to this.
Well, I've just recently written a lot about the idea of the Lucifugus, so the light fleeing ones, and my own writing too. I ended up discovering an absolute ton of stuff that I'd never considered before, and I thought, oh my God, this is really interesting stuff. So when I was reading through your material, I thought, wow, there's definitely some. So essentially, from my perspective, I had not considered the Jewish, the Hebraic conceptualizations of this process. And so your interpretation as alongside the Lilitu themselves and their own cultural heritage, really expanded my understanding of it. So I'd already finished what I'd written by the time I'd read what you wrote, so I couldn't incorporate
Will it
that.
be in
But
your new book?
well, that's top secret, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not sure, but maybe. The idea of the light fleeing ones, though, it becomes something when you peer beyond the surface of it. I mean, the most obvious aspect of it in the European grimoire tradition is, of course, the intermediary spirit of the Grand Grimoire, Lucifugus Rofocale,
Mm, mm,
with Rofocale being an inversion of Lucifer. So
mm.
it's a very interesting constructed name of the intermediary of the grimoire tradition, and who exactly that is, and all the rest of that is something that I have written about.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it, the idea
Mm.
of light fleeing creatures, light fleeing demons, has expanded significantly after I read a lot of I went back and I reread a lot about what Jake wrote on the subject, what Jake Stratton Kent wrote about the subject, and there's so much more that we need to consider about that idea of light fleeing, specifically about why conjurations are done on the crescent moon, like
Yeah.
the beginning of the waxing, not a full moon. And there's still elements of that, the darkness uh, being a primary component of conjuring these spirits, which is really interesting. Um, Returning to your book and to the vignettes, I really liked one of them specifically on page 119, where you discuss the nature of Mesopotamian demons, and you draw some interesting parallels with how the Mesopotamians perceived them and how they are described within the European grimoires, which is sort of what we've just been talking about. So, this idea specifically about how demons live on the edges of civilization, on mountainsides, in swamps, and in specifically in little explored human territories. But from the perspective of your book and from what you've written about, could you elaborate further on that?
Sure. And thank you for uh, mentioning that vignette. Um, yes, that is in part also how they are described in Hebrew sources as well, even though we dare much more find them in everyday life as well, and present in human dwellings. To a certain extent, true about Arabic sources addressing the desert and mountains and ruins and certain haunted oases as well. It is just important when we speak in these matters to remember, so we don't start to create false dichotomies about nature and civilization. Uh, because many of the spiritual creatures described in my books thrives on and among humans and in cities.
Well,
And
that's what I was writing about, specifically about lucifugus spirits or light fleeing spirits, is that they, like you said, you specifically said the phrase, they hide in the nooks and crannies of
yeah,
the home.
yeah,
And lucifugus spirits tend to dwell within the house. And even when we look at the Grimorian Verum, we have the Astrakios prayer,
yeah,
which ends with Genius Domus, which is
yeah.
spirit of the house.
I think it's fantastic. And I also have my Vettir idola, which relate to the dwarves and the Nissen, close by to my Skerlan effigy when I addressed that. Yeah, I'm happy we made a same reflection on. And yeah, that and that said, many demons do prefer ruins and borderlands and mountains and caves and other liminal milieus. And also, Nergal was a deity of gates, and the ones under his rule were perceived to be outside the gates of the first cities in the hinterlands and in the underworld. And in some aspects, the hinterlands were perceived as the underworld, or as the underworld above ground, or as entrances to the underworld. And then we also have many parallels with the crossroads located outside of the city gates.
Right. So this idea of liminal spaces or desolate places being, I think it's Cadmus, one of my previous guests on the show, he refers to them as embassies of the underworld.
Mm, lovely
The
put.
the locations where one can check in and pass through, right?
Yeah. In the order, among the few good things I have to say about that was that already from the get-go, they mentioned that so if you're a practitioner in a large city, start to make note of benches, often benches that are a bit broken, but that are always shunned. That you never see either birds or maybe birds, but never never anything but dogs and birds approach. And there you can more easily find a gateway or a clutch to tap into if you cannot locate an apt crossroad inside your city.
That's really cool. I love that sort of stuff. Like the grimoires often tell us that, oh no, you have to have a 9 foot circle and you have to go out into a desolate place to do this kind of a conjuration. But it's possible. You just have to use
Mm.
different techniques. You have to use
Yeah,
more, you have to be smart in the way that you do it, but it's possible. You don't have to do it as like some grand ceremonial magician. It's very possible to get
exactly.
out there
Yeah,
and do folk magic essentially. You're out there in among people doing this, you know. I mean, the many of the grimoires, like the Ars Notoria, I think is probably the most um the best example really is like a university grimoire, and it was used
yeah,
predominantly in locations where population, in large population centers. So this was magic and sorcery being done by students in a university setting in, you know, heavily, well, urban environments for the time in which they were written, but that
yeah.
isn't to say that being in an urban environment means you can't do magic. You absolutely can.
Exactly. If you need to go to the forest to engage with the spirits, the problem likely lies within you or your techniques or preconceived notions, and it might very well be the case that by going into the forest, you don't actually even perceive or receive the forest or those dwelling there, but only brings your own preconceived notion or flourished or
Mm.
flowery notion of it. And yeah, I'm really a proponent for the access of magic to everyone, no matter where you're located.
100%. I've done magic in downtown Tokyo. So
Mm.
if you can do it there, you can pretty much do it anywhere in the world. Um,
I'm, I'm,
so
I'm really curious to find if some of our sources from the 1700s ever speak about um, conducting magic on a ship while it's moving, because it's one of the few things where I should suggest that that might be a hindering aspect. But yeah,
that would be
anyhow,
that would be pretty difficult, with all the
yeah,
swaying. um, so sort of sticking with the grimoires a bit, but focusing on your book. One of my favorite animals described within the grimoire corpus is the hoopoe bird, and it's mainly because you find it throughout all sorts of texts. So many texts make reference to it, and every single component of this bird, from its wings, its beak, its claws, its feathers, its blood, its entrails, every single component of it is used in some way in the preparation of tools or the consecrations of talismans, spells, medicines. You name it, you can find it. And I should elaborate further. The hoopoe bird itself, it has very necromantic connotations because it nests on the ground, and it tends to nest in graveyards specifically, and it has a very distinct vomit which it excretes into its nests, which has this pungent odor which scares predators away from its nest. It also has like incredible Solomonic lineage and history and stories, which make it a really interesting mythic creature as well. It has a crown on its head, all sorts of stuff, which makes it a really unique and fascinating bird through which we can draw out elements and aspects of the underworld through its components, through its materia. However, in your book, you describe the hyena. Could you tell us a little bit more about this animal and its importance to the sorcery of Lilith?
Sure. I just gonna address how is it you pronounce it? Hoopoe?
Hoopoe, I believe. It's the hoopoe bird.
Hoopoe. Yeah, I've seen the hoopoe bird arrive on smoke as messenger or as heralds, and
Yes,
and the
that's exactly what
same
it
I
is.
have seen with crows, crow shapes inside the smoke, and those are my only experience with them. I have thus far never worked with any hoopoe materia magica, and unless something comes my way in an ethic or rather organic way, I reckon I won't physically work with them. But of course, that does not prevent me or any other practitioner from working with them in other ways. And the bird itself in the Swedish translation is called härfågel. So it goes back to both a legion of soldiers, but also to the same etymological root as the herald or herald.
This is too much. You're hitting some really cool points for me right now. This is too much.
Lovely, lovely.
This is this
I
is
love when synergy occurs.
you're hitting personal. I don't like the phrase personal gnosis, but you're definitely on that
Yeah, yeah,
territory
yeah.
with me right now. Yeah.
Lovely. I'm so glad we were having this conversation. I've been really looking forward to it. Right, you asked me about the hyena.
Yes, the hyena.
Uh, I've been fortunate enough to have been gifted materia magica from hyenas, martens, and jackals, and none of which had any effect on their populations. And all three have truly been a boon to work with in relation to Lilith and various jinn operations. Hyenas can rightly be described as creatures of mystery, and numerous Arabian tales of nightly encounters between humans and the powerful striped hyenas show the importance of this animal in the symbolic thought of Arabian Bedouins. And these stories both reflect their fear and deep reverence for the jinn, to whom the hyenas in turn are closely linked, and they are often regarded as their emissaries or heralds. They can also be considered to ride on hyenas, or the hyenas can be one of the forms the jinn choose to incarnate as. Without going too much into neither the biblical book of Isaiah nor the Babylonian captivity, we shortly can address some general things worth noting from them in regards to the hyena. And Babylonian and Mesopotamian heritage influenced Jewish magic, folklore, and life in general. And Jewish demonology was vastly extended after entering into the Babylonian captivity. And many demon names bearing the hallmarks of Babylon were incorporated. I personally interpret more than one biblical passage as carrying implicit or explicit references to Lilith. However, within scholarly tradition, there is only one widely accepted or verified mention of Lilith in the canonical books of the Bible. And this, of course, occurs in Isaiah's famous and much debated passage 34:14. And that passage seemingly foretell of a land reduced to a desolate haunt of wilderness. And if it's okay, I will give two translations of this verse.
Please, please.
Wild dogs will prowl the ruins. Ostriches have the run of the place. Wildcats and hyenas will hunt together. Demons and devils dance through the night. The night demon Lilith, evil and rapacious, will establish permanent quarters. Scavenging carrion birds will breed and brood, infestations of ominous evil. And a more classic translation reads in the AMPC version. And the wild beasts of the desert will meet here with the howling creatures, wolves and hyenas of the island. And the shaggy wild goat will call to his fellow. The night monster will settle there and find for herself a place of rest. From this shockful verse, I have perceived four categories, which I recount for in volume 1 of She of the Night. But to not make it too elaborate, we only focus on category 2, which I dubbed Wild Beasts of the Island. And that category is dominated by hyenas and wolves, and both of them having solid connections to Lilith, and wolves also to Lamashtu. In some of the rarer translations, such as the WYC, references appear to beautiful beasts, creatures described as human in their upper half and resembling asses in their lower half. And such elements also align with the iconography of Lamashtu. Similarly, in the Septuagint, we find the term Onocentaurus, and that describes a mythical African creature, a hybrid of man and ass, often referred to as an ass centaur. The Onocentaurus should immediately call to mind the many amulets depicting Lamashtu standing upon a donkey. She can also be adorned by a donkey with donkey ears on her lion head. And on certain editions of the Greek Septuagint, Onocentaurus is also used to signify jackal, a correlation that makes perfect sense. Regardless of how we label or interpret these beings, one can recognize that most of them have very clear ties to shapeshifters. Wolves and hyenas and the others of this category are sometimes cloaked in human form and at other only semi-human. And these are the wild howling creatures of the island, and among them the hyenas play the largest part.
So this magica materia of the hyena is incredibly potent. It has so many connections through so much history, and I mean, in your book you go through this in quite significant detail as well. So there's so much that the sorcerer can engage with this with the magica materia of this animal. I think it's fascinating how we can delve into the mythic components of the flesh or the bones, the marrow, the blood of these creatures. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Moving on then, to some more information in your book, which I found really, really cool. Later, I think it's in book two. Although no, I think you describe it. Let's describe this quite a lot throughout the books, but you go on to describe something of the importance of the four queens, and it's something else that Jake Stratton Kent explored in his work. Um, Especially like a lot of us are very familiar with the Four Kings. They're very
Mm,
forward facing. They're the surface level of part of the grimoires that once you start to study them, you realize, oh, actually, these are really integral components of the grimoire process. They rule over the cardinal signs, etc. But what Jake Stratton Kent in his work through Geosophia and Cyprian the Mage, he explores this idea of the four queens, these specific four deities, which aren't so forward facing. They're a lot more subtle in presentation, but they have a significant effect on
mm.
the later tradition of European grimoire magic. So, who are these queens, and how do they fit into the story of Lilith?
Well, first of all, I'm quite glad that I had not read Jake's chapter on the Four Queens at the time that I wrote my chapters on them, because else I might have refrained from attempting to writing them, because most things that I have read or that I have read after, I have felt like, huh, this really simply sums it up well. So what do I do with it then? But yes, to me at least, uh, I view them slightly different than how Jake is describing them. But I only think that's good because that's how one can learn from the differences as well as our similar uh, ideas or perceptions of them. And for me, the four are most intriguing quartet. One cannot compare them with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And the theme of transubstantiation is not at play either. But we have a number of conundrums when it comes to them. We have one goddess, or if you so would have it, archdemoness, Lilith, and she reigns from her Tekufa throne of absolute midwinter. Then Nama's rule ends at the midway point between the winter solstice and the autumnal equinox, and begins halfway between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox. Then we have Mahalat. She's the lady of the white noon and the full moon. Um, she represents Egypt and the South in the Mediterranean Hebrew world. And her Tekufa seat is that of Tammuz. As the mother of the South, she represents the summer solstice. It is her time to literally shine. While finally, Agrat, the daughter of Mahalat, is the lady of the rising sun and the waxing moon, and she is the appointed ruler of Salamanca and Grenada. She plays the part of the Queen of the West in the Mediterranean Hebrew world. Dawn and the Nisan Tekufa throne of the vernal equinox belong to her. And the midway point between the equinoxes are the auspicious times that, for example, are mentioned and quite important in the Dragon Book of Essex, here called the cross quarters of the year. And it's the short interim period between the reign of one queen and the succeeding one. And among German Jews at the turn of the 19th century, these cross quarters were called the turn of the season. It was then that the demon queen's menstrual blood was perceived to fall into the waters of the world and poison them. And this is said to be the reason for the older chthonic custom, which forbade the drinking of water at the change of the seasons. It was especially dangerous to partake of the bitter waters if the turn of the seasons fell upon one of those auspicious nights of secular Tuesdays or Fridays. And in a ceremonial magic setting, I would estimate it to be exceedingly difficult to nurture a constructive and more deepened relation with Lilithine beings without using the structures and authority or protection from the petition for Tekufa queens, which is why that is something I recommend to all practitioners, really, to turn to them. And as you say, and as Jake also say, they fill complementary function to the four kings.
Well, they share that sort of they share the positions of the vernal equinox, well, the equinoxes and
Exactly.
the solstices. They share cardinality with direction. There's too many connections for it to not be related. There has to be some kind
For
of
sure.
relation. Yeah, there
Yeah.
has to be some kind of direct relationship. It's very difficult to parse out that relationship has been transmitted or how it manifests in the later grimoire tradition, but it's
Uh,
definitely something that we should be considering and to explore in this if you're interested in this form of magic.
exactly. And I have had a more loop-sider, or how to say, unbalanced approach, uh, or rather, I have experienced that the balance I needed in these operations have been given by these four queens. So I have quite little experience working with the four kings. But as these four queens all have partners, and since some of the four kings uh, names doesn't really come across as real names, I wouldn't be surprised
Oriens.
if we, yeah, yeah, of course. I wouldn't be surprised if they turn out to be their partners.
That's a
Um,
really interesting point. Yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
also a similarity um, with Samael, since he is not exclusive partner and goes between many of them. If that can relate something to the Trinitas, but what I want to mention is that I find it very useful, just as the thing that Brian describes in Naming the Heavens in relation to the Summa Sacra Magica. Uh, to be aware of these timings and to make mention of these queens in petitions and preparation uh, prior and post your, um, for example, goetic workings of the year,
mm,
as they will greatly help and seems quite eager to help with just a little incense and kind words, or maybe a poem recited to them. Or
mm,
as with any queen, come give some roses.
mm. I love this idea that they are essentially guardians of a period of time, and that
Mm,
by petitioning them, you are facilitating the expediency of the spirits which work in that region. If you could imagine
mm.
time as a map, much as the Heptameron describes
Oh,
all
I
the names of
love
the
that. Yeah,
spirits
yeah, yeah.
as regions of time. You know, you have this set of spirits over the spring and etc. The
Mm,
spring, the summer, etc. And then yeah, you can start sort of see how you can develop that grimoiric material that we have access to and
Mm,
sort of return it to something that we're, this essentially like what we're doing is a sort of like archaeology in a sense of uncovering these ancient concepts and ideas and putting them back together and trying to see how they fit into the larger puzzle. Um, so for me, I love puzzles, and there is no greater puzzle than the entire edifice of the Grimoire corpus. So
amen.
trying trying to find all these components and put them together is just absolutely fascinating to me. And it's so wonderful to actually engage with it firsthand as opposed to just intellectualizing it in an armchair.
Mm. I'm not going to compare Nama with Skirlin, uh, but uh, as Queen of Gateways, of initiation, of illumination, she is a fantastic spirit to turn to. And one of the most important ones to have active relation with if you're going to work with Lilifine beings.
Mm.
And the other tip to practitioners that is only getting started with wanting to know Lilith or working with Lilifine beings is to start with Agrat Patmahalat, the first queen, the queen of the spring um, vernal equinox. And her time of reign begins just a couple of days after I think this episode will be published. So it's an optimal time to get started, and you also don't have to start at that point. It's I only mention this because it is at that time her reign is beginning.
Mm.
And so the vernal equinox itself, or the day before, might be a very apt time to um, reach out for the first time to this queen or these beings.
Mm, mm. And by the same vein, Oriens as well as the
Sure.
the guardian of the gate of the east is the perfect complementary to that. So it's very interesting learning about this from reading your book and comparing it to what I've already studied through Jake. I'm not an expert in this subject at all. It's very difficult to it's not been easy for me to have my own personal opinions apart from what I've read through others because I haven't read enough of the source material, but it's very fascinating and I absolutely love it. So, um, moving on though, and staying sort of kind of with the Queen, specifically, with Lilith, but also I think, there's a little bit of Paimon here as well, maybe, but and as well as some other Grimoire spirits. But listeners who are well read up on the Grimoires will know about the Mirror of Bileth, and you include a wonderful little section on this operation of the mirror in your book. Can you explain something of this spirit and the history of this operation?
Sure, or maybe not the history of the operation, but I have some empiric data that I don't think no I know I don't included it in my book. So it's some practical tips, and that is I quite often refrain from using iron and steel when creating talisman, etc. When working with Lilith and Lilithine beings. Friends that have used the designated raw material steel to create this tool of communication and divination have reported good results from it. But then again, my friends neither have nor aim to have a more personal relation to Lilith or Bilat. Um, when I created this tool myself, I used lead for the body, the handle and frame, and then silver for the mirror itself.
Nice.
Copper would be an excellent substitute, and so could possibly bronze be as well. But I think it's rather too hard to work the way it's needed, bronze, unless you cast bronze yourself. But yeah, that's a whole nother business. And in fact, brass
Brass,
would
yes.
do excellent as well.
Well,
And
brass has a very long history as the medium of magic mirrors, especially
definitely,
In Asia. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And the previously mentioned demoness Ahia, she is described with words such as brass or bronze-like, um, denoting her bellicose nature, and also how her fingers or her nose or her claws are described.
Mm.
Going back to more on brass and copper for this mirror, I just like to explain the rationale behind it, so it's not just something that, oh, here is a good description of an operation, let's change the raw material. It's not something I do willy-nilly. I first consult the beings that I intend to work with, and then I try to find historical precedents for it that are relevant to magic. And we learn in Genesis 4:22 that Scylla bore Tubal-Cain, a forger of every cutting tool of Nehoshet and Barzel, and the Achot of Tubal-Cain was Nama. Nehoshet is commonly translated as brass, copper, or bronze, and this famed arcane blacksmith Tubal-Cain was called a sharpener, and is accredited with inventing the art of alloying. And those are the reasons why I picked alloys, or that other people can pick alloys to work with under his blessing. Brass, of course, is an alloy of copper and zinc, while bronze is an alloy of copper and often combined with tin. Copper is frequently attributed with various magical properties and appears repeatedly in such contexts throughout my sources. But what does all of this tell us? Well, first, I would suggest, when creating this mirror, to establish a relationship with Nama, or if one has not yet made the acquaintance with any Lilithine being, maybe begin with cultivating a relation to Agrat Bat Mahalat. Anyhow, once a relationship is established with Nama, one begins to give offerings to her brother Tubal-Cain. And when good rapport has been established with both, then ask the brother to aid you and guide your hands with his skill and precision in making the mirror of Lilith. And then petition the sister to, with her skills and powers, bless the mirror and to guide your instruments as the signs and seals are being engraved. And also on behalf of her intimate relationship with Lilith and Lilith herself, establish the 2- or 3-way mirror gateway. And why you turn to Nama is because she have been reported to have her adorants be inspired to create effigies and engravings related to idols. And I think the greatest work that someone have carried out through me have been when her hand has guided mine. So I think this is something that will work for many practitioners.
That's fantastic. And I think one of my previous guests, Simone Baldacchi, he
Mm.
he made a really interesting point about, oh, forgive me. he made a really interesting.
Hephaestus?
Yeah, well, the Hephaestus is the father of blacksmiths and that, and he made a point about the idea of the underworld being in the heavens and the idea
Mm,
of the cosmogonic waters being there's a component of space of the sky which is made of brass and
mm,
that meteorites that fell were considered to have some essence of that um,
mm.
nature within them. I
Yeah,
can't
the
remember
waters
exactly
beyond
what he said.
heavens. Yeah, and the sea of brass in the
Yes,
waters beyond heaven. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And it's just really interesting that the substitution that you've suggested still fits and still has this
Mm.
very archaic but still very potent connection, which is absolutely fascinating. Staying with the stars, and it's my penultimate question really for you, but and it's one that I love to ask people when there's some connection to my own work. But what can you tell us about the stellar origins of Lilith?
Mm. I reckon two or threefold stellar origin to Lilith might be apt. So uh, it won't be a short reply. Um, First, I quite expectedly must mention Lilith as Algol. And it's a forceful and volatile, or maybe rather poisonous stellar spirit. The Hebrews knew Algol as Rosh ha-Shatan, Satan's head, but also as Lilith. And this demonic star traces its name back to the sinister Arabian entity bearing the name of Al Ghul, known as the demon, ogre, ghoul, or demon monster of the waste. Algol is a white variable star that brightens and dims, and making it a very conspicuous star in the northern heavens. Agrippa points out an important aspect regarding Algol, which is quite applicable to Lilith herself, and that is Caput, the head of Algol, is of the nature of Saturn and Jupiter. And at surface, this might sound odd when related to Lilith, but if we think of all the dark aspects of Zeus, then one comes closer in understanding how it's applicable to Lilith and also to the king among the gods. And Agrippa further mentions Algol as here follows in Eric Perdue's preeminent translation. I will point out some of the insignias of the stars according to the writings of Hermes and Fabit. The first star is called Caput Algol. Among stones, it presides over diamonds, and among plants, black hellebore and mugwort. Within these two Agrippa quotes, many keys to Lilith can be found. And the second stellar part of her ancestry, and in my book, the most important one, is found among the sitting gods of the Ekur. And the Ekur, that is to say, among the circumpolar, ever visible asterisms in the sky. The name Ekur itself means mountain home, and that was the main temple of Nippur, the very heart and center of the Mesopotamian religious and ritual life.
Hmm.
The asterism in question is the one that belongs to Ninlil and is called Mul Margida, the wagon. And the wagon is part of our Ursa Major.
Yes.
We in famed star source that you also mentioned, Mulapin 2, which was likely compiled circa 1000 BCE, even though the only preserved copy is from circa 700 BCE, find the north wind connected with the wagon constellation. And as
The
you know,
reign of heaven. Yeah.
exactly. And as you know, Ninlil was connected with them both. And Dr. Susan M. Hoffman, who is an astronomer and a historian of astronomy, and in my book, one of the most interesting contemporary voices in historical astronomy. She underlines that the vein in Babylonia is not identical to the German asterism of the Great Chariot, as the latter developed from the Great Bear of the Greco-Roman epoch. And then finally, a less volatile and in texts far less explored celestial matter is the oppressingly heavy yet utterly powerful aspect or guise form of Lilith as Saturn.
Right.
If one approaches the Grimoires from or in a hygromanteia understanding or setting, it seems self-evident that having a good standing relation with Saturn Lilith will expedite your requests and also grant a long-lasting effect to your work and your talismans created within the hygromanteia praxis, as Saturn is the motor and force driving that approach. And that is similar to how Mars can be seen to fill an equal role for the Grimorium Verum. And here we must recall that Lilith the Elder's first husband is the archangel of Mars days, the hot and fiery Samael.
So connected to both the lesser and the greater malefics in astrology. Yeah. That idea of her being connected through Saturn via the hygromanteia is absolutely spot on as well. Yeah, excellent observation. You and I work very similar forms of magic when it comes to the Grimorium Verum and the hygromanteia, eh?
Do you have the time to address the hygromanteia and Lilith?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, bring up. Let's say.
Remember, it's all your fault, Matt. While I remain purged with hyssop and washed clean, whiter than snow.
Let's make this the last question then. What is the connection of Lilith with the hygromanteia? And first of all, what is the hygromanteia for our listeners?
That you can explain in a more
I'll explain it very briefly. Then hygromanteia is it's a collection of Byzantine documents which ended up being transmitted into Italy in and around the 14th century. There you go. It has potentially older antecedents as far back as the 6th century, but that's sort of contested. But yeah, it's the book itself, the hygromanteia, is essentially the foundation of the Key of Solomon. That's what all the renditions or the recensions of the Key of Solomon that we have today come from this book. So here you go.
Yeah, very well put. I love it. Well, in it, some demons mentioned therein relate directly to Lilith. We find in the evocation of the Lady of the Mountains. It's stamped in at least 2 hygro manuscripts. And then we also find the demon Onoskelis, which is at least mentioned 3 times in exclusively Saturnine contexts. While a 4th appearance in a corrupted form also occurs in the Conjuration of the East in one manuscript. And the 3 roads crossroad is mentioned 7 times throughout the hygromanteia corpus, 3 times strictly for the site of the operant circle, and 3 times in relation to the divinatory skull device. And finally, the crossroads and the Onoskelis demon both appear in the operation called beginning of the basin divination. And there we are instructed to take a new and empty basin, then go to an old meeting of 3 roads, dig a pit, put the basin inside, A tad later comes the recitation, which in part reads, demons of great Hades, the first among who is called Orneas, Theft, Maldur, Fartul, Sarsana, Karkinar, and his offspring, Onoskelis. Then we have the Lady of the Mountains, who is Kale or Kale of the Mountains. And that name means the good-natured one. And here it is likely chosen or used yet again as a courteous way of addressing the demoness, or simply a Noah name for her. In Aramaic incantation texts from Nippur, I have found a list recounting names of Lilith, wherein Kale or Kali is mentioned. And a Jewish list from the same publication features fairly similar to the Aramaic list. And among the names of Lilith, there we find Kale. She occurs in the Hygromanteia manuscript iterations B2 and V. Kale is described as a monstrous fairy queen and seems in Greek context to be another name for the Lamia. McCown, in his iteration of Testament of Solomon, categorized a trinity of spirits as the three Liliths or Empusas, and they were called Onoskelis and Epsigos and Obisut, and it's lowercase Liliths, which means he here used them as denoting she-devils or demonesses to him. And to him, the Empusae are the Greek version of Liliata, that is Liliths or she-devils. And as such, they are interchangeable. And those were my best description of the closest relations to Lilith found, at least in the operations that I have practiced from the Hygromanteia.
Wonderful. I've just come across the what is it, the text Lamentations in Greek Ritual. I think
Yep.
I forget the author's name. I'm sorry. She makes a connection with the Lady of the Mountains. Marathakis, in his translation of the Hygromanteia, he makes a point about how the good-natured one, being the translation of Kale, is not so accurate because she's actually not such a good-natured one. But that idea of approaching her with that epithet is good to do because it appeases her as that in that sense. But in the text I was just mentioning, the Lamentations in Greek Ritual, I think the author connects this Lady of the Mountains, Kale. There's a later Christian saint which is connected to her, but then she's also connected to Artemis Callisti. And through Artemis Callisti, her more primordial or more anciently, she's connected through Hecate. And I was talking with one of my previous guests, Briar, about this exact subject while I was like
Oh,
researching it.
lovely.
And I was just putting some things together, and she emailed me just a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about it recently. And the fact that you just brought that up now as well is it's just really interesting that the threads of connection there, especially with Lilith and with the demon on Eskelis. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. And it's adding more to this texture of the folkloric aspect of the Hygromanteia, which I think is really interesting especially when you consider that this Lady of the Mountains, she's only described in two versions. I think it's B2 and
Yeah.
V.
Yeah.
And neither of those texts are overly concerned with talisman creation or timings. They're much more concerned with like this more like visceral get out there. And I think in both cases, immediately preceding the Lady of the Mountains ritual, which is like this You do it on August 1st, and
Yeah,
you go out into the wilderness, and you give a offering of, I think it's pine cones and
yeah,
honey.
pine
Um,
kernels and honey. Yeah,
yeah, and then when you make contact, when you encounter the spirit, you then like express your desire. But then the office, if that's the best way of describing it,
mm,
the result of this is, as described in both versions of the spell, is that you create like a hanging talisman which you attach to your horse, to your steed, which like
yeah,
can give it like special like horse powers. It can
yeah.
run extra fast and give it extra stamina, etc. Um,
I'm super happy that I have had friends that were okay with trying this out. So yeah, well, I have access to horses, but I don't have a standing relation with those horses. But
but
a very kind witch have tried it out. Go
But
on.
what we find though is that throughout the history of the grimoire tradition that this repeats, and so we find it again repeated, this same spell repeated, this fairy queen like theme with the Sibylla as described by Scott in Discovery of Witchcraft.
Mm,
And then again in the Grimorium Verum, we find this idea of the three spirits that come to one's chamber at night, and you can make a feast for them. You provide food for them in the same manner. And the I think in the Grimorium Verum, the office of these spirits is that they can teach you a form of. Or that's it. In all cases, they give you a ring. And
yeah.
the one in Scott is a ring of invisibility, and the one in Grimorium Verum is a ring which allows you to win at all gambling. And I think there's
Mm,
this idea that it begins as this idea of the horse. You can give a horse anything that you want, then you can get invisibility, and then another version of it is that you can win at gambling. All of these ideas, I think it's just you're encountering a spirit and you're asking for whatever you want. You're asking for
mm,
something. It has the ability to do that. It's just that the examples given in the texts are very specific. And I think that
yeah.
when we're dealing with grimoire magic in this sense, and we can understand the lineage of these spells, because that's what they are. They have
Mm,
histories and stories which span thousands of years in some cases. We see that they have different target results in many of these
mm,
cases, but what we should be really engaged when we choose to engage with these spirits, I think it's much more beneficial to the magician that instead of thinking, well, I don't have a horse, I can't do
yeah,
this.
yeah, 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 of course.
I don't have a horse. Ah, but you have a
uh,
car. So maybe you could
yeah,
adapt it to your car in some way. And then
yeah,
maybe you're like, well, actually, I don't really care about cars. I might be more interested in something else. And then you can approach the spirit in any way that you
yeah,
want to, and approach them and say, well, I recognize you. I've approached you. This is what I desire. It doesn't matter what it is. You use you use the examples in the grimoires and in the text essentially as a blueprint or as a foundation of what you could do, not as a written in stone, this is the only thing that's possible.
sure. I have some of the literal um, cues in these spells, theories around them, because some of them could tie back to um, how the Seasonous Three Saints and their sister that is attacked by a child-stealing demon are described, because therein the horse is often mentioned as an auspicious or liminal animal that the devil or the evil spirit can pass in through the guarded safe haven through a seed in the foot of the horse. And then with the mountain aspect, I have made two reflections. One is that the chambers of uh, these three saints' sister that they protect uh, is often described as being inside a pillar, which is a very weird formulation. And the only literal things I could think of are those North African churches that you climb up to and that are located in pillar-like rocks or cliffs. And if an origin is to be traced to Seseng and Barfaranges or to Aihia, this could be part of the solution. The other thing could just be that many of these female coded or perceived spirits really seem to flock on mountains and often taking the shapes of birds. And one of the Bronze Age burial mounds close by here is located atop of a mountain, and it's there I went to execute the operation 3 times. And it seemed, even though people could easily come by there, it seemed to be an ideal place to go to. So sometimes it can be worth taking the text literal as well as going to a mountain, but not getting sidetracked on making your horse
Yes.
fly, as it were.
Yes. Yeah.
And when we mentioned Maratakis, one thing that he didn't put into his excellent book, but that he mentioned in a lecture considering the Hygromanteia, is the suggestion of bronze for the metal of mercury. And this is something that I think many magicians will benefit from, so they can let go of the desperate search for the 7 metals or working with highly dangerous things like literal mercury.
Yeah, don't work with mercury, people. That's
you're
going to die.
And be careful when working with lead as well.
Yep, lead to sulfur. Don't do that. Just don't.
At least not indoors. Don't do that. And using sulfur is mostly just rude.
Yeah, because you're going to cast everyone away very quickly unless they're a very specific type of martial spirit, right?
It was very weird creating the planetary incense blend for Mars when I know I could never be able to do it, because to use it in that sense. But then it worked out very well, because then I could use it as a talismanic bottle instead of as literal incense.
Oh, that's a really good idea. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
I like that.
Thank you.
So just create.
And same goes with the planetary incense blend of Saturn, according to Agrippa, because
yes.
I was maybe overconfident when I used it indoors once, and I ended up poisoning myself. Or actually, I rather just got high, and I hadn't been for many years. They were like, "Oh shit, am I getting poisoned?" No, just having a interesting but very bad high.
Everyone, please be very careful when following the instructions for the incenses in the grimoires. Please use common sense. I cannot be liable for anything that you do. Okay?
Oh, it was common sense. That was the ingredient that I forgot.
Yes, that is the ingredient that we all need more of. Yes. All right.
Amen.
With that, I think we should bring this interview to a close, because it's been absolutely fantastic. There's so many questions that we had to skip over because we've taken up too much time, and I think maybe it could be worth having another interview at some point in the future to go over some other points and questions, because there's so much in this book. I really
would love it.
I really have to recommend it to everybody. If you've not pulled the trigger on buying it yet, please do. I believe it is now in its 2nd publication. And
by the time this podcast come out, the 2nd edition will have been published.
There you go. So everyone, please, if you get the opportunity to get your hands on it, please do. It's absolutely worth every single penny. And the binding, the presentation of it, of the actual text itself, is just phenomenal. It's a really gorgeous, beautiful book. So please do seek it out. It's so valuable, not only for the historical source materials, the etymology, just the history and the archaeology of it all. There's so much. I mean, there's a whole point about the Burney relief that we were going to go into, but we've just run out of time. But it's definitely worth looking into and getting the text and reading it and then rereading it as I've just done. Thank you, Lili, so much for coming onto the show today to talk about your absolutely wonderful monolithic encyclopedic text, She of the Night. For people who would like to learn more about you or find you online, is there anywhere that people can go to do that?
Sure. And also just thank you for those words. They truly honor my life's work on Lilith. So thank you. I'm constantly working on projects in general and historic incense blends and astrological talismans in specific. And by that accord, you can reach me on my Instagram dedicated to that. And it's at idlulili, all simply. And I'm currently working on expanding my previous Hecate publication. I'm preparing a ritual course on Hecate. That's basically it. Yeah.
And where can people find that course in the future?
Information will be posted on my Instagram. It's the only place I'm really active at, and I don't know what form it will take in practicality. Something I probably will ask you for cues about.
Okay. All right. Well, we can do that. All right. Well, I will include the link to your Instagram in the description below. Lili, thank you again so much for coming onto the show. It's been really, really fantastic talking to you.
The pleasure has truly been mine. It's lovely to talk to you again, Matt, and to be able to address the Hadean readers and listeners. So thank you, and a big thank you to everyone that have or will buy my books. I deeply appreciate you all. Ave Amalilith.
That was Lili Regulus discussing their most recent work, She of the Night, Volumes 1 and 2 by Theion Publishing. Lili and I have been good friends now for several years, but this was our first time getting to hang out face to face and delight in discussing the nature and history of the enigmatic demoness, Lilith. I adore how they described their book as a votive gift to the spirits, something I find to be one of the greatest acts of creative magic that someone can set out to accomplish. We talked about the 7 winds that predate the fourfold division of the horizon and their origins in ancient Mesopotamia, the nature of the north and its cosmogonic essence, and of the waning moon and the light-fleeing or lucifugian qualities of those telluric spirits which constellate about Lilith's myths and origins. I especially loved our discussion on the underworld qualities of Magica Materia, the heraldic hoopoe and the howling hyena. We delved deep into the mysteries of the 4 queens, which remain even to this day a deep and very rich vein of untapped sorcerous potential. We briefly mentioned the nature of the Shekinah for those of you who have read David Rankin's recent book, Clavis Spiritum, and threading all of these vital feminine forces, unbridled by nature, terrifying and violent, yet imbued with creative power. They collectively represent the dark sorceries of the night, the hidden places of the earth where men fear to tread, and offer a vision into the primal Goetic necromancy which survives to this day at the core of the European tradition. Truly, I can't recommend this book any higher, and I urge those curious to seek it out and to commit to reading its pages to come to a better understanding of these forbidden and foreboding feminine aspects of nature, and to immerse yourself in the raw power that beats under the ink and paper. If you have listened this far, then thank you so much for your continued support for Hadean Press and our global authorship. If you have any suggestions for authors that you would like to hear on the podcast in the future, then please leave a comment below. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe for more just like this in the future. Our February episode is still a bit up in the air right now, but perhaps there will be some hints and clues over on social media, so keep your eyes peeled over there for more information to come. We have a lot of work on in the coming year, and we look forward to bringing you the best the varied authors of the UnderWorld have to offer. Thank you all again so much for listening. I have been your host, Matt Hadfield, and I will see you all again in the next one.